Show you guys how to use ChemDraw now. Instructions for downloading ChemDraw are in the experiment manual in, I believe, the second paragraph of the lab. Okay, so I'm going to click this green hexagonal icon with the letters CD. And then you guys only need to do this once, and then it should remember your settings. You go to File, Apply Document Settings From, and select ACS Document 1996. And how you'll know you've done that correctly is every new document you create will say Untitled ACS Document 1996-1. Okay, so to start out, for exercise 1, we're going to use this chain drawing tool here, and we're going to select the acyclic version, and then you just click where you want it to go, and then it asks how many carbons. So there's 7 carbons in the main chain, so I'm going to enter 7, and then click Add. Okay, so to add our methyl group, I'm going to use the bond drawing tool here, which you can use to draw one bond at a time. And what you want to do if you're adding a bond to an existing molecule is you want to hover over where you want it to go until the blue circle appears. It's like right next to my cursor there. And then you can do one of two things. You can either click and hold and drag until it's oriented the way that you want it and then let go. Or, oh, by the way, you can use this to undo a mistake. Or you can simply, so there's my circle, you can simply click and then it'll put that there. Okay, so now for adding double bonds, you want to hover over where you want your double bond to go until a blue rectangle appears, and then you just right click and then you select what type of bond you want. So we want a double bond plain like that. And if you want the double bond line to be under the main chain, you just keep clicking while it's highlighted until it is. And we can also use this multiple bond tool here to add double bonds and triple bonds. I'm going to select the double bond because that's what we want. And then you just do the same thing, hover until the blue rectangle appears, and then you just click instead of right clicking. And then you just click until the orientation or the positioning is how you want it. In other words, the lines below the main chain. Okay, so that is exercise 1. For exercise 2, we're going to use the chain drawing tool again. And this time we're going to draw a chain with 1 extra carbon. So since that molecule has 6 carbons, we're going to do 7 again, and we're going to turn that extra carbon into the NH2. But first, since this is not oriented how it is in the experiment manual, I'm going to use this rectangular selection tool here, select the whole molecule, and go to Object, Flip Vertical to get it oriented how it is in the experiment manual. And then I'm going to use my text tool here to add the NH2. So I just hover over, if you're adding text to a molecule, you hover over the position where you want it to go until the blue circle appears, and then you click, and then you type. So I'm going to type NH2, and there we go. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to show you is how to erase one bond at a time. So let's say we had an extra double bond here that we didn't want. You just use the eraser tool, and that allows you to erase one bond at a time. So you just hover over what you want to erase, and then click once, and then it erases. Okay, so that's exercise 2. Now we're going to use these ring drawing tools for exercise 3. So for the first molecule, I am going to select this one. It works the same way as the drawing tool where you can either click or click and hold and drag. I'm just going to click because we like how it's oriented now. And then now in order to add the substituents, I'm going to use my single bond drawing tool again, except this time, if you were to just click, you would see that it would get the wrong orientation. So you want to use the click and hold and drag method. Okay? And notice how the blue circles are appearing before I elongate the chain. Now I'm going to use this benzene ring here to do the other molecule, and I'm going to use the single bond drawing tool to put in my substituents. And then I'm going to use the text tool to enter their labels. So here it's really important that you don't type H2N, you type NH2, and the reason is because you want to start typing the atoms in the order in which they are bonded to the rest of the molecule. So in other words, what's bonded to the ring is a nitrogen, not a hydrogen, because if hydrogen were bonded to the ring and nitrogen, that would violate the octet rule. So I'm typing NH2, not H2N. And then here, you want to type this symbol correctly, or if you capitalized the R and the B, it would have given you a red error message box. Now, what if you want to erase more than one bond at a time? Well, you have 2 options. So we can use either one of these 2 selection tools. I'm going to start with the rectangular one, or the marquee tool here. And so if it had already selected it, but if it hadn't, and let's say I want to erase this, I just drag a box, like draw a box around everything I want to erase, make sure it's all inside the blue box, and then hit the delete or backspace key on your keyboard. Now, if you want to make more complex selections where things are really close together, that's where the lasso tool comes in handy. And I'm going to use this to erase this molecule on the left here. So you just carefully try your best to draw around only that molecule and make sure only that is inside the box. It is. And then do the same thing, delete or backspace. And drew out the first molecule for exercise 4. So there it is. Now to select it, we use the marquee tool here, draw a box around it, and then you can go to edit copy or use a keyboard shortcut, Control C or Command C on a Mac, and then Control V to paste, or Command V or edit paste. And then you use the hand to drag it to where you want it. Okay? And then we're going to use the arrow tool here. I like the center arrow. and then you can click, hold, and drag to change the length of the arrow. Okay, and then we also want to modify the product. So actually I did those steps in reverse, sorry. Use the eraser tool to erase the double bond to convert it to a single bond, and then it automatically knows that this becomes OH because it knows how to draw a proper Lewis structure. Okay, so that's exercise 4. Now for exercise 5, you're just going to select and copy the molecules from exercises 1 through 3. So again, edit copy or Control C or Command C if you're using a Mac, and then you just drag them, and we're going to put them in a horizontal row. So you just select, use the selection tool, and then drag it with the hand. Okay, so now they're all in a row. Because it says to clean them up first, but it doesn't matter. So now we're going to clean them up individually. So we are going to draw a box around each one and then go to Structure, Clean Up Structure, or Shift Control K on a PC or Shift Command K on a Mac. Those are the keyboard shortcuts. Now notice how for this one it changes it from a chair cyclohexane to a flat cyclohexane. So it's fine here, but if you wanted it to stay a chair, that would be an instance where you might not want to use the cleanup tool. But the purpose of this exercise is to use the cleanup tool, so we did. Now I'm going to draw a box around everything to select them all, and I'm going to go to Object, Align, TB Centers, and then Object, Distribute horizontally. Okay, now for the next exercise, I also pre-drew the molecules in the arrow, because you guys know how to do that. Now what we're going to do is add the HBR by using the text tool. So the text tool isn't just for putting labels on atoms and groups on molecules, it can also be used to type freestanding text. Okay, so I'm going to drag that closer to my arrow there, and then now I'm going to select both the HBR and the arrow and go to Object, Align, Left, Right, Centers, and then I'm going to go to Object and Group. Now this is really important because if you do not group them and you went on to the next step, you would see that the HBR would end up on top of the arrow, and you don't want that to happen. You want the HBR and the arrow to move together. Now we're going to go to Object, Align, TB Centers, and Object, Distribute horizontally. And we can group them again. By the way, the shortcut for grouping is Command G on a Mac or Control G on a PC. Okay, and I've also pre-drawn the next exercise here. And so for this one, we are instead going to select everything, and we are going to go to Structure and then Clean Up Reaction. And you can group it if you want, just to keep it together. Okay, and then for the next one, pre-drew that stuff. So for finding the charges, that would be here above this A to A symbol. It might show up as a lone pair. It's whatever you use last, but here's where you find the lone pair, or a radical, and then charges. So I want the circle with the plus charge. Then I'm going to make sure the blue circle appears at the carbon I'm adding it to, and then I just drag it until it's where I want it. And then I'm going to put the minus charge on the base. So I'm just going to draw that close, and then I'll move it a little closer. There we go. Now we're going to put on our curvy arrows. We want the double-headed ones, which are these two rows, not the single-headed ones down here. These are for radical reactions. These are the most common. So this first one is in the clockwise direction and looks like it's about 120. That's just like the height of the arc, essentially. And I'm going to start with my cursor at the bond where it originates and draw it to where it's going. So again, here I'm going to start at the bond where the arrow originates and draw to where it's going. And now I need a counterclockwise arrow for this one. And let me move this up a little. Okay. For exercise 9, I used the text tool and the arrow tool to draw that stuff. But so now we need this rubber stamp tool, which is the template tool. And then we're going to go to bicyclics and then select this one. And that's going to be the skeleton for our molecule. And so I'm going to draw in that stuff and copy and paste. Okay, now I'm also going to use the text tool to put in the H2O, but what I wanted to point out is that when typing H2O, you should click this, which is formula, so that it knows automatically to subscript the 2, otherwise it won't. And then you can move that closer together and make it nicer. So for exercise 10, I pre-drew that molecule as well. and we are just going to go to View and then Show Analysis Window. And you can see all these boxes are checked. If you didn't want all of those things, you could uncheck some of them and just leave whatever you wanted checked, but we want them all. I also want to show you that this is how you have ChemDraw calculate a molecular weight of a complex molecule for you, is using this, and you can also have it determine the formula for you, which is really nice. Okay, and now we're just going to click Paste. And then we're done with that part, and now I will show you how to copy into Word. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to copy images from ChemDraw into Word. So there are a few ways you can do this. The first way I'm going to show you is the most straightforward. So we have our selection tool. This is already selected, but if it weren't, you would just select the selection tool, and it probably wouldn't do it for you. Then you would drag a box around it, draw a box around it, and then you would go to Edit Copy, or Control-C if you're on a PC, or Command-C if you're on a Mac, and then you would go to Edit Paste, or Control-V on a PC, or Command-V on a Mac. So notice how this image looks nice and sharp. It's not fuzzy. What you don't want to do is drag and drop, because then the image will be fuzzy. So not only is that ugly, but that also makes us TAs wonder whether you screenshotted it from somewhere else or whether you actually did the work yourself. So make it clear that you did the work yourself by learning to do this properly. Now, if the easy copy-paste method doesn't work for you, then what you can also do is go back into ChemDraw and save it as an image file. So you go to File, Save, and there are a bunch of formats listed in the lab manual, but there are two that won't give you fuzzy looking images, which are PNG and TIFF. So you should use one of those two. So those are PNG here and then TIFF there. Those are scalable, so we like that. I'm going to go with PNG, and that resolution's fine. So I am going to save this as something, and then save it there. It's going to give you that error message. That's okay. Okay, and then you go back into Word, and then you can do this one of two ways. You can use this insert menu and then File, or you can do it this way. Go to Insert, Pictures, and then we want Picture from File, and then it will let you choose that. So we want to go to that, and then hit Insert, and then it inserts it for you. And see, also nice and sharp, not fuzzy like the others. Excel using this icon here, and since this is a newer version of Excel, we need to tell it to create a blank workbook. It no longer does that automatically. So make sure blank workbook is selected, and then hit Create. And this is a workbook, which is basically one or more spreadsheets. And if you wanted to add, so this is one spreadsheet. If you wanted to add another one, you would use this plus sign down here, but we don't need to. So a spreadsheet is made up of a bunch of cells, and they can contain texts, numbers, or formulas, essentially. And each cell is named with a column and a row. So columns have letters and rows have numbers. So this right here is cell A1 because it's in column A and row 1. And it even says that up there when you select a cell. It'll tell you which cell that is. Type into a cell, you just select it and start typing. And you can use the down and sideways arrows on your keyboard to move between cells. I went ahead and copied the data for exercise 1. Now notice how this label for B is a little cut off at the end. So what I want to do to fix that is I just go up to this line between B and C at the top and double click on it. And then to graph, we just want to select all the cells that have numbers in them that we want to plot. And then we can do this one of two ways. You can go to Insert, Chart, XY Scatter, or you can go to this insert menu down here and choose this picture on the far left. You do not want any of the ones where the points are connected. Okay, so here's my chart. Now I'm going to drag it out of the way. Now notice that it has a chart title, but it doesn't have axis labels, so we want to fix that. So it says in the experiment manual you can select the chart area, and this green plus sign is supposed to appear. I'm not seeing that on my Mac version, but what you can do is go to this green plus sign up here to add chart element, and then select axis titles, primary horizontal, and then we'll do the primary vertical one as well. Okay, so formatting for scatter plot titles is Y versus X. So our variable on the Y-axis is volume, so that's our dependent variable, and then versus time. Okay, and then we're going to give our axes labels. So starting with the X-axis, which is time, so we label what the variable is, and then we also want to include after that label in parentheses the units, which would be minutes. So it's really important because a lot of students lose points for either forgetting to label the axes altogether or forgetting the units. So don't throw away easy points. Okay. Okay, now the last thing we need to add is a trend line. So you can do this one of two ways. You can select all the data points, oops, make sure they're all selected, select all the data points, right click, and then go to add trend line. Or you can also do it this way using the chart elements menu. So select trend line, and we want a linear trend line because that's approximately the shape of our data. Okay, and so now we've got our trend line. I just want to show you one more thing that you're not required to do for this exercise, but you may need to do at some point, which is how to get and display a trendline equation. So what you want to do is just right click on the trend line itself and go to Format Trend Line, and then you would just check off Display Equation on Chart. And there you go. Okay, so to save you guys from having to watch me type, I went ahead and entered in the headings and the density from the later exercises, so don't worry about that. Right now we are going to talk about how to do calculations in Excel. And we're going to start by calculating this change in volume here. So the strength of a spreadsheet program is that it allows you to type just a single formula and use it to do a bunch of calculations that use that formula. So it saves you from punching a bunch of numbers into your calculator, and I'll show you an example of that in a sec. But to calculate the change in volume, that would be the current volume minus the initial volume. So here at time 0, the current volume is 10.1. 10.1 minus 10.1 is easy, it's 0. Here we would do 11.9 minus 10.1 to get the change in volume at time 1 minute, etc. Okay, so notice how the initial volume is in cell B2. So that's important. So our formula would be, I mean, we could type, the current volume, which would be cell B2 here, cell B3 there, etc. We could do that minus 10.1, but there's a better way of doing it. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use an absolute reference. So first of all, when we're typing a formula, you can type up here in the formula bar, or you can just type directly into the cell. I prefer the latter. And you want to always start with an equal sign so that Excel knows that you want it to calculate stuff. So I'm going to start equal sign, and then the current volume is, so we're at time 0, so that would be cell B2, would be the volume at time 0, and then minus the initial volume, which is also contained in cell B2, except instead of doing B2 minus B2, we want to include our absolute reference, because that way if we change the amount that's in cell B2 or the number that's in cell B2, it'll automatically redo those calculations for you and update them. So in order to do that, we want to put a $sign before the letter and a $sign before the number. So $sign B, $sign 2. And then if we want to do calculations for the rest of the times, we just drag this little square in the lower right hand corner down to the last row, and it fills them in for you, which is great. If you want to check and make sure Excel is doing these calculations correctly, all you need to do is click on one of these other cells. So if we click on that one, we see that, yep, the current volume at time 4 minutes is in cell B6, there, cell B6, and the initial volume that it's using in the calculation is in cell B2. And then also to show you guys how the absolute reference thing works, or just to demonstrate that it works, if I change this to 5 and hit enter, notice how all those volumes change. But we don't want that, so I'm going to hit this backwards arrow. Okay, and now we're going to do exercise 5, which is calculating the change in mass from this known density that it told you to enter into another cell, which is 1.39. Okay, so in order to calculate change in mass, that's going to be the change in volume times the density, because density is mass over volume. So we've got the change in volume here, that's in column C, and we've got our density value here in cell E2. So I am going to once again type enter, and if we want to multiply, we need to use the asterisk symbol, not X. Okay, so we're going to do C2, because that's the change in volume at time 0, asterisk, and then once again we're going to use an absolute reference, because you can also do that for constants, and that's nice because if we decided then, oh wait, we want to calculate it using this different value for density, you could just type in that other value and it would redo all the calculations automatically. So we're going to do $sign E, $sign 2. And then just like we did before, we can, drag down from the square at the bottom, and it does all the calculations for us. So that's 10 sets of numbers you could have punched into the calculator, or you could just simply do it with Excel real quick. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to talk about is formatting cells. So in order to format cells, you select whichever cells you want to format, one or more. I'm going to select all of these, and then you right click and you go to Format Cells. And you can change a bunch of things here, like you can change the alignment, for instance, if we want those numbers to be centered. It's kind of weird because, I mean, some of them are aligned to the right, some of them are aligned to the left. You could do that here, or you can do that there in the main menu, but this is nice because it's like one-stop shopping. You can change the font if you want, put a border around it, change the fill color, etc. But what you can also do, and some of you may have noticed that when you were entering in the initial data under volume, when you were entering in 26.0 and 31.0, it probably defaulted to 26 and 31 and dropped that 0. And so if we want to add a certain number of decimal points, or decimal places rather, we just go to number, and then you can type however many decimal places you want in the box. And we actually do want 2, so I'm going to leave that as is and hit OK. And voila, you now have 2 decimal places. You could also do that up here by going to, if you wanted to increase the number of zeros, you just keep clicking until it has the desired number, but we don't want to, so yeah. Okay, and then also I can just embolden this up there, and there we go. So that is pretty much the exercise, except I don't know what happened to the chart I made, but okay, so that is pretty much the exercise. The only other thing I wanted to mention is in the experiment manual, it does tell you to play around with types of formulas as far as calculating things. So those could come in handy in the future, so I would recommend checking that out.